This is Smiling Sam Alvey, and you're listening to the MMA Think Tank.
You are listening to MMA Think Tank with Jay and Mike.
Welcome to the MMA Think Tank podcast. I am your host, Jay, along with my co-host, Mike. You know, Mike, it's been another couple of weeks, and we actually got to see a fight that wasn't scheduled or nobody really knew about.
Yeah, it was underground, I think.
Yeah. Todd Duffy, did you catch that fight?
I did. He got knocked out by some random dude I never seen.
Yeah.
It wasn't sanctioned, Jay.
No, it wasn't sanctioned at all. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was in this little movie called Batman versus Superman.
Yes, it was.
And you know what? I just have to say, to all the critics, boo to you. That movie was fantastic. Mike, what did you think?
You know, first time I saw it, I thought it was a little slow but solid. I got to watch these movies at least twice, which I've seen it a couple times, but more than a couple times. But the second time I watched it, I certainly fell in your camp. I thought it was a great movie. It was just fantastic. It's a slow burn that gets to the end. It's just an amazing flick.
Yeah. Things start clicking in it once you watch it a couple of times. You start understanding a little bit more. Sure, there's things that they're holding back because, you know what? There's things about comic books sometimes they throw out there and they set up future issues. And that's what this movie is doing, setting up future movies. So you got to take it, you know, as you're going in there, you got to understand that. And I just got to say one more thing about this movie. Ben Affleck, amazing. The true Batman that I can finally embrace. Never really embraced Christian Bale. Michael Keaton comes the closest. That's how crazy it is for me with Batman. Michael Keaton came the closest. He was a great Bruce Wayne, but he didn't quite get that Batman feel to it.
I did like Christian Bale, but what I thought was really interesting was watching the Todd Duffy thing. Just was an underground fight when basically Bruce Wayne is trying to find some information, so he goes to an underground fight, and Todd Duffy is there fighting some other guy, and that's kind of how we got to know a little bit about Bruce Wayne, his dealings with the underworld, as mafiosos and stuff like that. You see him as a businessman. You see him as Batman. You see him as all the different things in this movie, which was great. And I agree with Jay that I think he's the best Batman by far. Not Christian Bale.
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck, sorry, he's become the same thing now. He's become Batman for me. So he's fantastic as an older Batman. We'll see if Todd Duffy can make it into the next movie. Well, I don't know, but we'll see.
I don't know. We're constantly seeing more and more mixed martial artists make it into movies, and I find it pretty cool, even if it's the Todd Duffys of the mixed martial arts world. Yep. You got Misha Tate. She makes movies. They might not be in the theater, but they make movies too. There's a bunch of mixed martial artists out there making these B movie flicks and everything. So it's pretty cool.
Of course, Ronda Rousey, she's made some big ones too.
Yeah.
So
Expendables 3. Let's go ahead and do some recap here. We had WSOF 29 just a couple of weeks ago. Let's get into that. Of course, that was Justin Gaethje versus Brian Foster.
Well, Brian Foster, he had won the single night, one night tournament between 8 lightweights for the WSOF 25, and he came out victorious, and he got the chance to fight Justin Gaethje for the lightweight championship, and it was less than 2 minutes. Justin Gaethje just came out. They both threw wild strikes, but it was the leg kicks that started getting to Foster, hurt his leg, and put him down, and he couldn't continue. I think it was 2 minutes. It was just a fantastic fight for Justin Gaethje. He, like Marlon Moraes, is, they're a big fish in a small pond, and hopefully they'll be getting out of that small pond and into the UFC.
Yeah, we could only hope. Watching Justin Gaethje with those kicks, very reminiscent of Jose Aldo and Uriah Faber back in the day.
Yeah.
Just brutal leg kicks. I don't see how Brian Foster took all those kicks that he did. But anyway, like you said, less than 2 minutes, he was done. Justin Gaethje, I don't think anybody beats him in that division or that organization. I think he just needs to move out, like you said.
Yeah, and Brian Foster is a pretty solid opponent. He had a great record. He's got tons of finishes, and split down the middle really. So he's a solid guy, really good guy. And Justin Gaethje just ran through him. Speaking of solid guys coming up, WSOF 30 is tomorrow. David Branch, dual champ. David Branch, he has the middleweight and light heavyweight belt there in WSOF. He's fighting Clifford Starks, and also for the co-main event, you got John Fitch taking on. I'm not sure how you say his first name, but it's João Zeferino. They're going for the vacant welterweight title. Basically, what has happened, the reason it's vacant is because, if you guys remember, Husamar Paul Harris, he has a little bit of a putting people on hold as in holding submissions too long, and he has been stripped of his belt because of the Jake Shields fight. So originally it was Jake Shields taking on John Fitch for this belt. Shields got injured in training, so Zeferino, who came very close to winning the one-night tournament, matter of factly, he beat Brian Foster in the first round, but because of injuries, Foster came back. Anyway, he's coming in on short notice as a lightweight, fighting at welterweight, and going to fight John Fitch for the welterweight championship. David Branch, he's defending against Clifford Starks for the 185 belt. Clifford Starks is fantastic as well. I mean, the guy's 13-2, 3 KOs, 3 subs. He's 3-0 with the WSOF, but 5 wins overall. Not overall, 5 wins in a row, including some Bellator fights, going against, the aforementioned David Branch, who's 17-3, got 5 KOs, 6 subs, 7-0 in the WSOF, has not been defeated in the WSOF. Both these guys, UFC, used to fight in the UFC. Branch 2-2, and Starks 1-2. So they've come quite a long way, Jay. And I think that it's going to be just a fantastic fight for the main event.
Yeah, it should be a great fight. I don't know much about Zeferino, but you're right. He almost won that tournament. So it should be pretty exciting. And I think that he's going to give John Fitch a run for his money.
Yeah, he has 15 subs in his 20 wins. Zeferino does.
Yeah,
so the guy's
that's
pretty much a submission ace. And he did put away a big guy like Foster, which I think was impressive. But John Fitch is such a grinder, ever since we've seen him in the UFC. I'd like to pick Zeferino here, but the way that the fight went in the rematch that very same night with Zeferino and Foster, with Foster beating him, I think that Fitch may just be too big for him.
Yeah,
so
believe me.
Go with Fitch.
Yeah, believe me, I'd love to pick Zeferino to win this fight too. Just total a lot of bad memories of John Fitch in the UFC. Man, so many boring moments, I should say. Now, between David Branch and Clifford Starks, who do you got winning that fight?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Branch, but both of them have fought at middleweight and light heavyweight. They're mostly both middleweight fighters. But I'm going to go with Branch. He's a Renzo Gracie black belt. I think he's going to win it. It's going to be a 5-round fight. I think he actually might win it by submission. Starks is a fantastic striker, but I think that's where it'll be his downfall. I think that Branch is going to be able to grab him and take him down and maybe get a rear naked choke.
That sounds like what's going to happen. I don't know too much about these guys to really give a solid pick on, but I'm going to go with you and just say, yeah, Branch probably take it.
Yeah. Let's hope for Zeferino, huh?
Yeah, let's hope for Zeferino for sure, because we all know John Fitch.
I'm willing to be wrong.
Yeah, there you go. Mike, let's go ahead and recap another fight card that happened just about 2 weeks ago, and that was UFC Fight Night 85, Frank Mir versus Mark Hunt. And I just let me first say this fight. I knew what was going to happen. I knew that Mir was going to get KO'd. Just he hasn't looked great, but I didn't know it was going to be that bad. I didn't know that Mark Hunt was just going to do one of his walk-off KOs on Frank Mir.
I don't think he knew it.
I didn't think it was going to happen that fast. No, but in a way, it's like as soon as he hit him and just walked away, man, Mark is terrifying. He's terrifying, Mike.
He's a really great, jovial guy, you know. He's a religious dude. He's a fan favorite. All this kind of stuff is all Mark Hunt. And, man, I mean, he's a K1 kickboxer, or I should say former K1 kickboxer, because it doesn't do it anymore. But the frame that guy has, I mean, just one-punch knockout power is always there. And it's great to see a guy respectful. It's not going to, you know, because they're told to, you know, continue until, you know, they call it. And he, like you said, he knocked him down, walked away. The ref walked over there, looked at Frank Mir, and it was like, oh, no, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But when you got that much power where you could just hit a guy, and as he's going down, just start to walk away because you know you've knocked him out, you're a scary, scary man. Very scary. But it was, you know, a great fight for Mark Hunt. Not so great for Frank Mir, but Mark Hunt, great job, man.
Well, it's interesting, though, too, Jay, is that he has now, I believe, 2 in a row. And 2 in a row in the heavyweight division, you know, that's 1 or 2 fights away from a title. At least one more fight for a title shot, I think. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm not asking who you think he should fight next or anything like that, but Mark Hunt is really just 1 fight or 2 fights above 500. And he very well could be fighting for a title soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not that hard to get into the title hunt in that division.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens with him next. Another fight on that card, which was spectacular, especially for one man that goes by the name Neil Magny. Neil Magny looked incredible, but you wouldn't have guessed that in the first round. He didn't look very incredible in that first round. Neil Magny versus Hector Lombard. Mike, why don't you tell the fans about this fight?
Okay, so basically they come out in the first round, and, you know, Neil Magny's going to want to use his reach. You know, Neil Magny not only is, you know, taller than Hector Lombard, who really should be fighting. He's just a ball of muscle. I'll just say that. Kind of a Tyrannosaurus Rex type with his length. But you know what? When Lombard gets inside, it could be lights out, and that's what it almost was for Neil Magny. Got inside early, landed a right hand. Magny fell down, but you know, composed himself. But the punches kept coming. You know, after about a minute, Magny was kind of getting up, and then he would get taken right back down. I mean, it was solidly round 1 was Lombard, but you could tell that Magny was getting his wits and starting to come back a little bit at the end of the round. Yeah,
that was a 10-8 round. I had it for Lombard.
Yeah, I still had it at 10-9 because, well, you know, it was a while ago. It was a couple weeks ago, so maybe I did have it 10-8. I'm not sure. But why I thought it might have been a 10-8-9 at least now is that he was able to survive it and throw a couple of punches near the end of the round, but it was solidly for sure borderline 10-8, 10-9 for me. Yeah,
but you know, after that, it seemed that Hector slowed down a bit, which he typically does in after the first round. He's got all that muscle and everything, but you know, Magny, the way he came back and the way he fought his butt off, I was impressed, and to end up being the first man to finish Hector Lombard was very impressive.
Yeah, you know, it's also, you got to remember too, in round 2 is that Magny was coming at him and starting to win that round, and then he was dropped again by Lombard in the round 2. Yeah. And survived that as well. Not as bad as
first
round 1. I think he won round 2, but he got dropped again.
Yep.
And you know, like you said with Lombard, he's very muscular, but also I think he punched himself out a little bit in the first round. Third round, Magny came out, and it was all Magny because basically in round 2 he had almost finished Lombard, and after surviving, you know, the whole fight, he wins by TKO, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a fantastic fight. Like I said, first man to defeat Hector Lombard, finish him that way, finish him in any way in the UFC.
Yeah, in like over 40 fights.
Yeah, it's crazy, and Neil Magny does it. Especially after that first round. I thought Magny was going to be out. I thought it was over in the first round.
Oh, I did too. I was bummed because we both like Neil Magny. We think he's a great guy and a great fighter. I was like, oh, okay. You know, he couldn't do it against Maya. It looks like he can't do it against another former champ.
Yep.
Or a former champ, I should say.
I think the first thing I thought within the first 30 seconds was, oh, me and Mike were wrong about this one. But no, we weren't exactly right because we wanted him to win. We said it was decision. We were going to give him the decision, and he threw a wrench into that. Said, nope, I'm going to win by TKO. So,
and moving up the ranks.
Yeah, big time. Great job to Neil Magny for that. Mike, let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and talk about a fight night card coming up. UFC Fight Night 88. Cody Garbrandt, awesome fighter. You know him, I know him, against Thomas Almeida, another good fighter. Let's talk about this fight card.
Yeah, the UFC released this, I'd say, a couple days ago to maybe the beginning of this week. I'm not sure, but basically, it's going to have Cody Garbrandt, Thomas Almeida, like you said. Also, Renan Barão versus Jeremy Stephens. That's Renan Barão's first step into featherweight in the UFC since losing his belt to TJ. So we also have Aljamain Sterling versus Brian Caraway. That was just released today. Fantastic. Some other fights on here that I think are pretty good too. Tarek Saffiedine versus Rick Story. George Masvidal versus Lorenz Larkin, and Paul Felder versus Josh Berkman. But to go back to Cody Garbrandt versus Thomas Almeida, both undefeated guys, both really, really good prospects that really need to fight somebody, I think, that's, in the top 5. But they're going to fight each other and I guess become the prime prospect.
Yeah.
Almeida, he's got, I think, 20 fights or something. He's 20-0, tons of finishes. Garbrandt's, he's, I think, 8 or 9-0. Tons of knockouts. I mean, I'm looking forward to this fight. This is going to be a good fight. Going to be free on Fox Sports 1.
It's going to be an amazing card. You look at all these fighters, you got Renan Barão fighting Jeremy Stephens. That is a great matchup.
Oh, yeah.
That is awesome. Aljamain Sterling versus Brian Caraway. Honestly, I think Aljamain Sterling's going to run right through him. I don't see Brian Caraway beating Aljamain Sterling, but I know why they put this fight together. Sterling wanted this fight because he doesn't like Caraway. There's a lot of bad beef there.
A lot of people don't like Caraway, it seems like. He seems like he's ducking fights and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Sterling's been saying. And you know what? They're going to fight, and, at least one of them is going to put up a fight. The other guy's going to go down, and I think that guy's going to be Brian Caraway going down, unfortunately, for him.
I will say that I'm picking, Sterling in this fight for sure. But Caraway, he's a gamer. He's been around a while. He's been in a lot of fights. He's a really good submission guy as well. So he has a chance in this fight. I think Sterling is just a rung above him. And he's had way less fights than him, so that should tell you how much better he is than Caraway. Comes from a better camp in Serra Longo. So I will go with Aljamain Sterling on this. I think that a lot of people are picking, to backtrack just a little bit, a lot of people are picking Renan Barão solely over Jeremy Stephens.
Oh, I'm not.
I don't know. Yeah, because people tend to forget that not just his losses against Dillashaw, which aren't, it's not horrible. I mean, but, he didn't look that great against, I forget who he fought in between then, but he fought somebody and he didn't look that great. So Stephens could put him away. I probably will still go with Barão, but this is going to be a closer fight than I think a lot of us are thinking.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way I put it too. I think Barão is going to edge him out in this fight. It may go to a decision. That's what I'm thinking. But when it comes to Jeremy Stephens, you cannot put Jeremy Stephens down in this fight. Right. You can't call him out right away. I think he has a great fighting chance to beat Barão. I just think that Barão might edge him out. But if
Mitch Gagnon was who he fought in between the TJ fights.
Yeah, and that's who,
Mitch Gagnon was who Renan Barão fought in between the TJ fights.
Yeah. But my point was, and that is who.
I see.
You know what I'm saying? He's fighting Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens has looked great in his last few fights. The guy's a good fighter. So I don't know. It's a toss up here, but I'm going Barão by decision here. If I had to pick, I know we're not really doing straight up picks here, but it's nice to run through these fights in this way, and then later on do our picks when it gets closer. But Yeah, if I had to pick right now, I'd say Barao. But Stevens is a gamer. I don't see that guy just dropping for Barao.
And, I don't know who I would pick in, I'll say my preliminary picks, since like you just said, we kind of do a quick pick when things are released. The Garbrandt Almeida fight,
that's tough.
I'm gonna lean towards Almeida, but man, this fight could go either way.
Garbrandt's got those hands, and
yeah,
he's a dangerous man.
His wrestling and striking together is such a great mix. He's not really like Chuck Liddell back in the day, but man, he's so young. He's like
close.
Sterling.
Yeah, it's close to Chuck Liddell back in the day.
Yeah.
I think preliminary pick, I'd say Garbrandt. I'm just going with Garbrandt here. It might change as we get closer, but right now I'll just throw out there and say Garbrandt.
Yeah, and then, the Safadine story, Masvidal, Larkin, Felder, Berkman fight, those fights. I think those are solid fights, to watch on the way up to those.
I'd like to see Paul Felder, beat Josh Berkman personally. I'd like to see that because I like Paul Felder. I think he's a good dude. And Jorge Masvidal, I think that I think he's going to beat Larkin. I'm just throwing these preliminary out there. I think he'll beat Larkin.
That'll be a great striking matchup too, right there. Both good kickboxers.
Safadine, I remember him from Strikeforce. Solid fighter, but I think Rick Story beats him. All preliminary, but that's what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think Story will take down Safadine and work from there.
That's what I think. But yeah, so that's pretty much Fight Night 88, and that's a solid card. Those fights right there are pretty solid, so look forward to that. Mike, now let's get into some news because we've got a lot of news to cover these past 2 weeks. A lot of crazy things happen. So go ahead and get into news.
News Corner.
Well, everything from the UFC, Bellator, and even something from WSOF, but we'll start off with... let's just start off with one of the big things. Jon Jones, back in the news. Back having law troubles in a car again, having troubles with the law. If you don't know already, and Jay, please.
Was there any women in the car?
This time, no women, just himself.
Any drugs?
I don't believe there was any drugs.
Okay.
Although it
so
had
far
to do
so good.
With,
so far so good.
Yeah. It was just him and supposedly drag racing. So basically what had happened, and Jay, correct me if I missed any of this stuff up, because it has happened over the last week. Jones was pulled over for drag racing. He says he was not drag racing. The video is out there, guys. You can watch it. Whether you love or hate Jones or love or hate the cops, they're both a-holes in this position. I wish both of them would have been better.
Yes.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'll just continue on. And because Jon Jones does not, cooperate with the cops, he basically continues to get more tickets after tickets. And then because of that, his parole has been broken, so he turned himself in on Tuesday and was in jail for a night. And then on Wednesday, had his hearing. They took away his original parole, made a new parole, which added anger management classes, because I can't believe how much he cussed and name called the cop and not get taken in. He can't drive unless it's for quote unquote work and his probation officer knows. He can still fight against Daniel Cormier, which, thank the Lord above, I want to see that fight. Jay, did I miss anything in what transpired?
No, I want to add though. After watching that, we've
got a lot of stuff to talk about for sure.
the cop and Jones, like you said, they both acted like children. Okay, but here's the thing: this is what the cop has on his side. It's called a badge, John. It's called a badge, and with that badge, he's allowed to act like this towards you, and you have to take it. And unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. Now, yes, we have something called free speech, which you clearly used it on the video.
Yes.
Yet, that caused you at least 4 extra tickets. You might have gotten one.
When's the last time you called an officer of the law an effing pig? And I censored myself there.
Yeah, never. And that's because, not because I love the law, but it's because you have to respect them. to some degree because they could throw your butt in the slammer. And not just for saying that, mind you, but they'll find something to get on you, and which they did that night. I don't think he would have got more than 1 or 2 tickets tops if he wasn't such a jerk. I think that he getting those 5 tickets was because of the way Jon acted.
Right.
And I'm not saying that the cop was a saint. He was rude too. Okay, very rude. Acted childish as well. But he's got that badge. Unfortunately, Jon's got to learn to deal with that. And you don't rev your engine and take off at a higher rate of speed than normal. And that's what the cop said he did, and that's the grounds for pulling him over.
Especially when he's had so much trouble in a car.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. And, people have said this in the past, and maybe it was you, and we all feel it. Get a cab, get Uber, or just drive the speed limit. You've had so many chances now that the average person, you or me, would have been thrown in jail a while ago for some of these things.
Well, you violate probation, and most guys are going to get taken in, or at least when you get your hearing, then you'll be taken in again. I highly doubt you're going to get slapped on the wrist a second time for violating probation if you're just a regular average Joe. But when you got money,
I'm trying to say is that, but he still continues to do this, and I don't know. When I say I'm at my wit's end with him, it sounds like I'm his dad, and I'm not. But I want to see this guy compete because of the kind of athlete he is. He's an amazing athlete. But I don't know, man. He could become one of these people that maybe he doesn't get hurt all the time, so they have to have plan Bs on cards. But he may become a plan B fighter because he just can't, stay out of trouble.
Well, if he can't stay out of trouble, it eventually it will bite him in the butt. Right now he's skating by and he's getting slapped on the wrist, but eventually I don't think that golden horseshoe will continue to stick. I think he'll end up getting in trouble big time one of these days if he doesn't cool it. He hasn't learned his lesson. I don't know what it's going to take, but Jon Jones needs to get it together because he is a great athlete. We do love to see him in the cage. But if he's going to be a douchebag and do all this crazy stuff outside of fighting and competing, well, then, I'm kind of, I'm there with you. I kind of feel that I really don't want to see him if he continues to be that way.
Yeah, it's big for the UFC also because, really Jon Jones is their third big star when you look at, if you're going to put up 3 big stars, you have Ronda Rousey, you have, Conor McGregor. And they've both lost in their last fights. And now you have Jon Jones who hasn't lost. I mean, not counting the disqualification against Hamill, who he was beating, who they should have stopped it already. But I digress. But if they lose Jon Jones now, it doesn't mean that the UFC folds up. But these are 3 big stars that are having problems. So it's just kind of weird.
Yeah, it's crazy. But Jon, get it together, man, because you have a lot of fans that do love you and that do want to see you compete. Mike and I still want to see you compete, but just cool it with that douchebaggery stuff. Cool it. We want to see you compete.
Yeah, speaking of competing and coming back from competing, finally, Carla Esparza, the Cookie Monster, the very first strawweight champ. She won the championship through going through tough and beat Rose Namajunas. Then she went on to lose to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but she hasn't fought. Gosh,
over a
year, Jay.
Yeah, over a year. Last time was March 14th of 2000.
She's filling in for Jessica Aguilar. Jessica Aguilar, the former WSOF strawweight champ. Esparza's filling in for Juliana Lima at UFC 198. That's the big Brazilian card that has seriously every single Brazilian star on it, with the exception of Renan Barão and Jose Aldo, it seems. So you just throw out a big Brazilian name, they're on it. And also another controversy here: Cyborg versus Leslie Smith at a catchweight of 140. So yes, Cyborg Santos is going to be fighting for the UFC, at least, Jay, with one fight, because here's what I've read, which is she's going to fight at catchweight, but then she still wants to fight Holm. She still wants to fight Rousey. She wants to fight Miesha Tate, but she wants to fight them at 145 at Invicta. She doesn't really want to cut weight to 135. And if the UFC doesn't have a 145 division, that means she's just going to go back to Invicta and fight. And this was just a nice thing for the Brazilian fans.
That's the way it's looking. you fight one fight in the UFC at a catch weight and then expect to bring over the top competitors from the 135-pound weight division over to the 145 Invicta card. You must be insane. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And the UFC is not going to let that happen. And if I were Holly Holm or Ronda Rousey, I wouldn't want that to happen. So it's not happening. So it's just crazy the way this is going down. I don't understand it. Maybe it's a way for the UFC also to cash in a little bit, because Cyborg is kind of a mysterious fighter to some, because she's sort of made a name for herself with the whole beef with Ronda Rousey. So it makes some sense to showcase her in a way, but if she's not going to come over and fight full time with the UFC, what's the point?
Yeah, I'm still hoping for, I've talked about in the past, which is, that the UFC grabs the featherweights from Invicta like they did the strawweights.
Oh, I would be down with that
division, but hopefully this is kind of going to be the first punch in that kind of fight of bringing them over. But she's fighting Leslie Smith, and before we just move on and basically say she's going to lose. Leslie Smith, she's, I believe, 8-6
she's going to lose.
1, I believe. And she's kind of scrappy, but she's not that great.
Oh, no.
I don't have the stats in front of me.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I wrote about it earlier on Facebook.
Yeah, she's 8-6-1.
Yeah.
And, she won her last fight against Rin Nakai, but it was a decision. Before that, she lost to Jessica Ai by TKO.
Yeah. And something I remember now, too, is that she likes Cyborg and she's trained with Cyborg. So she has a lot of respect for Cyborg. So she's not one of those fighters that, has any negative feelings for steroids or anything, stuff like that. That's just some background on Leslie Smith. I'm picking Cyborg, obviously.
Oh, of course.
But,
but I just want to stop there just for a second and say, listen, again, she lost to Jessica Ai by TKO in the second round. And then she's going to step up and fight Cyborg?
Well, it's because nobody wanted to fight her.
No, but I'm just saying, Cyborg's a different animal than Jessica Ai. And I think that she's got way more powerful hands than Jessica Ai. And poor Leslie Smith. That's all I got to say.
Well, you know what? She's saying, don't say poor Leslie Smith. That basically Cyborg has some holes in her game. I don't know if she knows that from training with her or whatever, but or it could just be getting some shit from her, wanting to, saying that, hey, I can win this fight. Because if you're a fighter, you want to say you're going to win this fight, obviously. But, Jay, let me backtrack for a second. Esparza versus Lima.
Yeah.
You want to make a quick pick on that? Or
honestly,
I'm going Esparza.
I want to go Esparza, Mike, but the problem with Esparza is what happened to her? What happened to her? Why she lost so bad against Jędrzejczyk? And I know it's Jędrzejczyk, but she lost so bad March 14th of 2015 that she disappeared off the face of the earth for a whole year, and then all of a sudden just came back out of nowhere.
And that's why.
Where is her mind?
I think she's got her head right.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Be Juliana Lima.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Where's her head?
Yeah. I think she does it with her wrestling. I think it's going to be a decision. But the closer we get to it, the more we'll obviously break it down.
Yeah, exactly. I can't make a pick right now until we get closer. I just don't know where her head's at. I want to see some interviews with her and see what she has to say about what she's been doing. I don't know if she's been eating Oreo cookies all this time. I don't know what's going on with her. Yeah. So, those seem like a couple of good fights.
Speaking of somebody who can afford to eat some Oreo cookies if he wants to, Hector Lombard returning to middleweight because of the IV ban. So he doesn't feel healthy at welterweight. His last fight against Neil Magny was at welterweight, and so he's moving back to middleweight. Jay, he didn't do great in middleweight in the UFC. No, I don't see him picking up the title at middleweight. Neither. I think this is just him just continuing his career, getting paid, and trying to win some fights.
Yeah, I can see him getting dropped by the UFC by this move. I could see him losing 4 in a row in middleweight. So it's one of those things where I understand because health wise, some of these guys can't make the weight because of the IV ban, but at the same time, it's like you were already in this division and you weren't very good in this division.
Yeah, he was so great in Bellator and before that, and just couldn't make the transition over to the UFC, which happens to, a lot of champs outside the UFC. Not all, but a lot. So we'll see what his next move is, what his next fight is. But he still has that power. But I think
we got a lot of
best days behind him now.
Yeah, we got a lot of great middleweights, in the UFC. So that's a tough division.
Let's see here. Also, Bellator 155. I know we just talked about some women's fights just a minute ago. Let's go back and talk about Marlis Kunin fighting Juliana Budd for Bellator's inaugural women's featherweight title. Something I wrote. This just came out today, and something I wrote on Facebook was Bellator's on again, off again affair with the women fighters. They have a division, then they don't, and Scott Coker's brought it back. It's not a very big division yet, but they're going to go ahead and start off with a title fight. And like I said, Marlis Kunin, former Strikeforce champ, huge veteran, fighting Juliana Budd. And then also on that card, Marcin Held versus Dave Jansen 2. Jansen did win the first fight. Marcin Held, his last fight was against champ Will Brooks. Held is a really good submission ace. Dave Jansen, just a really good all-around guy. His last fight was also against Will Brooks. So you can kind of look at this as who's the second best if you want. Look at it how you want. It's going to be a great fight. I'm intrigued about that. Jay, you want me to go and move on, or you want to talk about that?
No, go ahead and move on, man, because we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
For sure, man. Michael Page, speaking of Bellator, but let's go and fast forward that, though, to 153. He's going to be fighting at 153 against Jeremy Holloway. Jeremy Holloway is kind of a newcomer to Bellator. Michael Page, of course, I don't know, 8-9-0. I don't have the stats in front of me. 9-0. Yeah, he's undefeated. Just fantastic. They need to let this. They got to let this guy go, Jay. I don't mean cut him. I mean they got to give him some big fights. They're still holding him back with Jeremy Holloway. Him and Brennan Ward need to fight at some point.
I agree. I don't know why they're holding Michael Page back. He's a beast. He's been knocking everybody out.
Yeah. And some
submissions.
Subs as well.
Yeah,
and it's exciting to watch.
Yeah, he's very exciting. Jeremy, the Hitman Holloway, or Hit him Holloway, I should say.
I think it's Hit him.
Yeah, that guy's. He's got a loss, in his Bellator debut, and I just don't see this guy doing anything for Michael Page. He's not going to bring. This is
a showcase fight, for sure,
definitely.
At some point, Page is going to fight Brennan Ward, or Page is going to fight for the title.
We've been saying that for a while, though. We've been saying, why isn't he fighting Brennan Ward?
Yeah,
we've been saying.
Well, there's some hijinks and tomfoolery floating around because remember Page had to pull out or was pulled out of his fight against another, really out of his league guy.
Well, you're not saying there's shenanigans afoot.
There's I don't want to get into any brouhaha here, but So anyway, let's just get out of the UFC and everything else right now and just talk about strictly MMA and say thank you, Lord, that the MMA ban has been lifted in New York State. Yes. Finally, all of the United States can have the UFC, Bellator, any MMA.
Yes,
can be found anywhere in the United States.
Yes, they can finally have MMA sanctioned fights in New York, and now we can finally get this big fight that we've always wanted at Madison Square Garden at some point. Who knows if Jon Jones does get the belt back, and he does continue on the straight and narrow. Hopefully, maybe he'll get that big fight in Madison Square Garden.
And let it be Anthony Johnson, right, Jay?
Let it be Anthony Johnson. and let Anthony Johnson beat him, please. That's all I ask.
Well, there's some things that have kind of been bandied about here that I wrote about when it happened. And, of course, in all honesty, I read the same information with other places. I didn't break any of this news. But, New York did allow mixed martial arts up till 97. But 97, 98 was when the quote-unquote dark period for MMA was, where a lot of people were complaining about it being cockfighting and stuff like that, and a lot of politicians didn't get they didn't like it, so it kind of got blacked out basically, and that's where the ban came from. But once Zuffa took over the UFC, and I realized the UFC is not MMA in general, but Zuffa was really pushing a lot of the charge. Once they took over with the help of Big John McCarthy and Jeff Blatnick, they were able to get the states to overturn their bans, but because New York was in league with some what do you call it, some unions, and the union that was for the food union. I'm sorry, my mind's not with me right now, but basically Zuffa, which is owned by the Fertitta brothers, they are non-union in their casinos, and in New York, that the union that deals with that, they were one of the biggest people that was stopping New York from allowing it, because they wanted to make sure that those casinos would become union, and they had a specific senator or representative kind of in their pocket, as happens with politicians of every different stripe. And now that guy is gone, and it's able to be opened up, and it's been opened up.
Yeah, that's great news, though, that they're going to be able to fight out there. It's been something that's been talked about for many, many years. I know Dana White's been pushing for it. The Fertitta brothers, fighters in general, have been pushing for it.
Yeah, because what's odd is that it's not odd, because you can tell, because of politics, they allowed amateur MMA to be fought there, just not pro MMA, and that should tell you that there was something going on.
Well, a lot of it, too, I think stems from, and this is just my thought process here, it's my opinion, I think that it might have something to do with the boxing organizations, too. I think that the fact that, Madison Square Garden was always one of these places that boxing was really showcased at, and I think that boxing has just been sort of going downhill lately.
Yeah.
Not in terms of it's going away anytime soon. I'm just saying that I think MMA is on the rise, whereas boxing's sort of puttering a bit, and they've lost a lot of stars. So I think they're going to need to recoup some of those losses that they may have gotten through matchups through boxing and stuff, with some MMA fights over there in New York. Who knows? But
it's going to be interesting too, because New York now is going to be able to make so much more money. When they have, these events come to their state, because all the events were in New Jersey or Connecticut, where you could, because Jay and I, we live in California, and so it's kind of a long state, but you can fit like 3 or 4 of those states over there on the East Coast in California. So, New Jersey is not that far, maybe a couple hours, 3 hours to go see a fight. So it's not too far away. But now New York will be able to reap the benefits of tourism, and for this, obviously they're big tourists.
It's a win-win. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yep, exactly.
So what else do you got?
Yeah, it's kind of a win-win for Bellator here. Get back into some other news. Matt Mitrione has signed with Bellator. Did not come to terms with the UFC. Likes his deal, multi-fight deal. And actually, he's going to be able to commentate on some of the kickboxing shows. Matt Mitrione is a guy that I thought the UFC could lose. Jay, I think you disagreed on that. I'm going to be happy to see him in Bellator, especially in the heavyweight division, because their heavyweight division is not very good. I mean, we talk about the UFC's heavyweight division. The Bellator division is not that great, although in a couple years, you just never know. They're getting such great young talent. But yeah, he's signed with Bellator. Jay, what's your thoughts on that?
I think what it is more so for me with Matt Mitrione is that I'm going to miss his interviews after he wins fights. I think that he's a pretty funny guy. He's a good dude. I'm kind of sad to lose him there, but in any case, I get to watch him anyway. In Bellator for free. It's great news, I guess, all the way around as an MMA fan. It's just one of those things where when you like certain guys, certain fighters, and then they leave the UFC, it's kind of bittersweet, Even though you're still going to watch them and see them fight, it's the UFC is always that pinnacle of greatness for me, for mixed martial arts and for most fighters. But I'm going to miss seeing him there. That's all.
For so long watching this sport, everybody was trying to get to the UFC and be in the UFC and retire in the UFC, and slowly but surely, we've got fighters, going ahead and making that move. Now, I haven't seen somebody, and Benson Henderson, I love you, but I'm not poo-pooing on you. But Benson Henderson, Matt Mitrione, those are guys that either they've gone as far as they're going to be. Benson Henderson, great champ at lightweight, the UFC.
Yeah.
Not sure if he was going to get a belt at welterweight. Had a pretty good chance, in my opinion, but probably not going to do it. And Max Mitrione was never going to be, in my opinion, a champ. So they opted out and moved to Bellator for more money. And, it helps their families or their investments and how they're going to live their lives. And to me, if you don't think you're going to be the champ, I understand why you'd go for more money, because this is such a short-lived career.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 years at best, unless you want to be like Ken Shamrock and continue to fighting more than you didn't fight in years, which is just insane, that type of thing. So I can understand it, I guess. You said, Jay, I agree. I'm ready to see him fight.
And it goes back to the, what I was talking about with MMA on the rise. These guys are able to now choose organizations where they can possibly make more money, and they could choose between these two organizations that are throwing money at them, and there's a bidding war, basically. Even 5 years ago, this would not be happening.
Right.
Now we have, honest to goodness, real MMA organizations that are both making money, and we're seeing the fighters reap the benefits, and it's a great thing. It's an awesome thing. So the bigger Bellator gets, the better it is for everybody, honestly.
And the WSOF is, they're still slower. They're a little slower than Bellator, but they're still picking up people, and they're still around. Something though I will say though is that even though they're picking, to go outside the UFC, as of now, I still feel that the UFC has the better fighters, and every better fighter in that division. So because if you fight in the WSOF or Bellator or anywhere else around the world, I can never consider you to be a top 3 guy, maybe even a top 5 guy, until you cut your teeth in the UFC. So it's good to get your money. It's good to get paid. It's good to get what you're worth. But I'm not going to consider you a top guy, or I shouldn't say a top guy. I'll consider you in the top 10, possibly the top 5. But you won't be in my top 3 if you fight in Bellator or WSOF.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I was kind of in the same boat with Melendez when he was fighting for Strikeforce, and he was he was actually ranked, I think, number 2 at one time.
Yeah,
and I didn't agree with that at all. And he just didn't have the level of competition that other guys in the lightweight division were facing in the UFC at the time. So I just thought that was kind of odd. But yeah, you're right about that. UFC is the pinnacle. So hey, but it's just good to see the other organizations get some good guys and start building upon that. So we shall see these guys fight there and for free. What else you got for us, Mike?
Staying in Bellator, we've got Marcos Galvão, Edward Dantes 2 at Bellator 156. Dantes won their first fight, I believe it was Bellator 89, so we're going back a while ago. And this will be for the Bantamweight Championship again. And, they've tried twice so far for this rematch, and one or the other gets hurt. Yeah. So hopefully this third time is a charm, and we'll get to see these guys fight. Outside of, Caldwell, who just beat Joe Warren, these two are probably your best guys at, along with those two guys, at bantamweight in Bellator. And of course, I would put them above those, above Warren and Caldwell. So they're going to be fighting, so that should be pretty good. Moving to the WSOF, we've got Blagoy Ivanov defending his heavyweight belt against Josh Copeland at WSOF 31. So we just had, WSOF 29 a couple weeks ago. We got WSOF 30 tomorrow. However, WSOF 31, I believe, is going to be in June. It's pretty far off, guys. So don't worry about setting that DVR or anything yet. Nothing else has been set on that card, but that heavyweight belt will be defended. Ivanov is going to defend against Josh Copeland. Jay, big news released over the last couple days. Let's get back to the big boys here. UFC 200. Finally, you got some fights here. Some pretty good ones. UFC 200.
I would say they're all right.
I'll give a quick list, and then we can go over them after your main event. Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 2 at 170. Frankie Aldo, excuse me.
Frankie Aldo.
Yes, Jose Aldo versus Frankie Edgar for the interim 145 belt, for that interim featherweight belt. Cain Velasquez versus Travis Brown. Joe Lozon taking on Diego Sanchez. Gegard Mousasi taking on Gegard Mousasi taking on Derek Brunson. Johnny Hendricks stepping in and taking Calvin Gastelum on. Jim Miller versus Takano Argomi. Sage Northcutt fighting a newcomer, Enrique Marin. Those are the 8 that have been put out so far. You know, cards usually are 10 or 11 fights, so we have 2 more going. Jay, why don't you start at the top, and we'll talk a little.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with McGregor versus Diaz 2. And first of all, I have to ask, what is McGregor thinking, wanting to fight this fight at 170 pounds, where he was ultimately, he was smashed, he was beat.
Yeah, he looked good for a lot of the fight, and just, it didn't go his way. And I agree. I would like to have seen it at 155 instead of 170. I don't need to see this fight again. I'll watch it, obviously. Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta, even Conor's manager, forget his first name, but his last name is Kavanaugh. They said, no, we don't want this fight. Why don't you, defend your belt or fight him at 155? And he's just wants to get that loss back so bad, I guess, that he wants it at 170.
Yeah. I could see if he wins this fight at 170, he sort of redeems himself, and he can say it doesn't matter what weight, blah blah blah. All that spiel he gives.
Yeah.
But if he loses, it looks terrible. It looks really bad for him. And this whole thing about, when he did lose the first fight, he talked about how he didn't use his energy well. Well, how is he going to use his energy in this fight? Because what are you going to do to Nate Diaz? What can you do any differently to beat Nate Diaz at this point?
Yeah, Diaz, his kryptonite is wrestling, and Conor doesn't have that. But I will say for Conor McGregor is that he trained for a fight at 155 with Rafael Dos Anjos, and ended up fighting a welterweight fight against Nate Diaz. So there is some wiggle room there for McGregor fighting differently. He didn't move around as well in that fight against Diaz. Maybe he goes back to kind of how he normally fights, and he'll have a full camp at 170, not training at 155 and then eating two breakfasts or 2 lunches, as he said once he ended up signing with Diaz the first time. Yep. So I didn't need this fight, but I'll watch it. McGregor and Diaz are still both great fighters. So I'm willing to watch, I guess. It's
going to be an entertaining fight, no doubt. I don't have anything necessarily against this fight. Other than the 170, I wish they would have done it at 155.
Yeah.
But honestly, I would have rather had McGregor defend his title against Frankie Edgar. That should be the fight there.
I agree.
But that's not what we're getting. So as for this fight, I'm still a Mac fan. And I'm still a Nate Diaz fan.
Right.
So I'm going to be thoroughly entertained no matter what in this fight. So that's all that's got to be said, really, I guess, on this fight. So
what's interesting too then is that Dana White has said and he told Conor McGregor that win or lose this fight, you're going to be defending your featherweight title. So even so, though he said that, they're making Jose Aldo versus Frankie Edgar an interim belt, which I think is just ridiculous. Yeah. I think whoever wins this fight should get a title shot. But an interim belt is for when somebody's hurt, they can't fight after a while. I mean, if we know that McGregor's going to defend his belt, after that, then why is it an interim belt? I don't know. But I don't know who's going to win that fight, Jay. I do know that Aldo won by decision the first time, but great fight. Willing to see this rematch a lot more than Diaz McGregor.
Yeah, me too. But the thing, and I alluded to this on the Facebook site when you wrote about UFC 200. I did post there, and I said, that I took some issue with some of the things going on in this card, and this was basically the main issue, was this fight here for an interim belt. Doesn't make much sense to me at all, because like you said, why is Dana White sort of talking out of both sides of his mouth? In one instance, he's saying that McGregor needs to, no matter win or lose, needs to defend his featherweight belt. But then on the other side, he's saying, you guys are fighting for the interim belt. And the problem I have is this is only 3 months. It's only been just over 3 months now since he's won that title belt, since he's won that featherweight belt. Why is it such a big deal that he hasn't defended it yet? Okay. There's been so many guys out there that didn't defend their belt for years, and they didn't get an interim belt for over a year at least. We had guys like GSP. We had guys like Cain Velasquez, Cruz. We had guys that didn't defend their belt for a long time before they announced an interim belt. And all of a sudden, 3 months in, we're going to do an interim belt. I know why. And I know it's all speculation, but in my mind, it's happening because Jose Aldo was whining about it. He did not want to fight unless the fight was going to be for a belt. So I agree, and I think it's Edgar as well. Edgar has been, and deservedly so, but I need the next title shot. I deserve it, and he does. And at least this way, I think it kind of qualms the talking of them, not getting their title shot because now they have an interim belt. I mean, but don't they know you don't have the real belt? I mean, it's one of those things where, Jose Aldo said that after he lost, he was not going to fight again unless it was for the belt. And then, a month or two after his loss, or not, actually, no, a month before the fight was going to happen with Dos Anjos and McGregor, you had him talking out there in the press saying, "I'm ready. I'm in shape and I'm ready to fight at any time." He's ready to take over for Dos Anjos if anything were to happen. Then a month later, something happens to Dos Anjos, and all of a sudden he pulls out and says, "No, I can't do it." Come on, Aldo. Right. Come on.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is talk. But I think for Edgar it means a little something more though, at least because he is already a champ at lightweight, or was a champ at lightweight.
Oh, I agree.
Even though it's a interim belt, he does kind of get that I had 2 belts. So like I said from the beginning, man, it shouldn't be for an interim belt.
No, it shouldn't.
I think it makes it 5 rounds. It makes it more big because they want everything to be big for this event, So as much as I think it's done for interim belt, I understand why they're doing it, and we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna make any picks right now, except for I'll just say Edgar wins.
It's one of those. It's one of those nod, wink, wink sort of things. Yeah, you're getting a belt, guys. Yeah. It's not a real belt. I'm sorry, guys. It's not a real belt. The owner of that real belt is fighting at 170 for some weird reason. But you know what? He's going to come back, and I will say that he smashes Aldo again if they do fight again. But
I think so too.
But I think with Edgar's got more of a shot against McGregor. He's got that wrestling, so you know what? And he's got that chin. So
yeah, well, I'm going to go ahead and pick Edgar against Aldo early on right now. I think he's the younger fighter, and at least in fights as well. He's fought him already, so I'm going to pick him. But we're talking about interim titles and things like that. I'm going to drop down to Cain Velasquez versus Travis Brown. Cain Velasquez, a guy always getting hurt. That I'm surprised they haven't had an interim belt because of him.
Yeah.
But he's fighting Travis Brown. I'm going to go Cain Velasquez on there, former 2-time heavyweight champ, against Travis Brown. Travis Brown's got some striking, pedigree there, got a lot of knockouts, but I think Cain's still one of the top best guys in the division.
But will we see some ring rust with Cain Velasquez? Will that be an issue?
As long as he's not fighting above sea level, as long as he's not I didn't get my joke there, I guess. But,
above sea level.
Well, he couldn't beat Verdum because it was above sea level.
Yeah, okay.
You gotta have sea level Cain, man.
Okay. Travis Travis Brown, he's a good fighter, but yeah, I'm looking at it the same way. If we get Cain Velasquez, who's all there and who's fighting without the ring rust, I'd go Cain Velasquez all day against Travis Brown. But I don't know what we're getting here. I just don't know what we're getting with Velasquez. With Travis Brown, we know what we're getting with him. He's always game. He's a very solid fighter. One of the best in the division by far, because it's not a deep division. But Cain Velasquez, I don't know what I'm getting. So at this point, I can't pick.
You talk about ring rust. I'm going to go with, unless you're considering this to be ring rust, it's his back as well. You know, he just got operated on his back.
Ooh,
so back problems are no joke in general, in life in general, but especially for athletes.
Yep.
So this could be the first fight we see a drop off in Cain Velasquez. I think that his loss against Verdum was just a butt whooping in general. Verdum would do it practically every time, in my opinion, because Verdum's a better fighter. But for me, if Velasquez comes out and doesn't look that great against Brown, I think it might have something to do with him constantly getting injured and then finally getting his back fixed.
Yeah, I just don't know. It's too many variables and things going on that I just have to see. As we get closer, I'm going to get my pick pinned down on this fight. But so far, right now, I'm not going to pick anybody in this one.
Yeah, Joe Lozon versus Diego Sanchez. Diego Sanchez got back in the win column against Jim Miller in his last fight. Joe Lozon, can't think offhand what his last fight was, but Joe Lozon, the post-fight bonus machine. The guy always is in a great fight, so that's gonna be a great fight.
Yeah.
Gegard Mousasi. Sorry, Jay.
Joe Lozon, he lost to Evan Dunham.
Okay,
it was solid performance by Evan Dunham by decision.
Evan Dunham got comeback fighter of the year from a lot of places because of that fight.
Yeah, but Joe Lozon, like you said, he always brings it. But against this reinvigorated Sanchez, I don't know. And I'm not a big fan of Sanchez, you know that. But Sanchez has looked good. It'll be a good fight.
I can't think of a time that Diego Sanchez was submitted. So that I think is a big thing. We could look that up later if we want to, but that's a big thing. If Sanchez has never been submitted or has rarely been submitted, that's going to be tough for Lozon to get a finish on him. But I'm a big Sanchez fan. I like both of them, but I'm rooting for Sanchez in this one because I'm a bigger Sanchez fan. But Gegard Mousasi versus Derek Brunson, that's your basic, former champ, still great guy, veteran versus kind of an up-and-comer guy. Brunson, I don't have my notes in front of me, but pretty sure he's got like 3 knockouts in his last 4 fights, and he has just been rolling. If he's not top 10 yet, he's going to be, especially if he beats Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah. I just want to tell you real quick that Diego Sanchez has never been submitted. Never.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
So good call on that one. Joe Lozon, I don't think, I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But Brunson is the guy that TKO'd our friend Sam Alvey, unfortunately. Yeah. But Brunson, great fighter. So that's going to be a great fight. Who are you picking in that one?
I'm still sticking with Mousasi, at least right now, early on. As always, we'll closer we get to it, we'll talk more about it. Of course, UFC 200 is going to be in July. So
yeah, we got quite some time.
Johnny Hendricks versus Kelvin Gastelum. That's kind of in a way like Mousasi Brunson. It's so much as you got a guy who's a former champ, been around a while. Gastelum, certainly not a newcomer, but still hasn't quite found that real, steady top 10 status.
Yeah.
Former tough champ. Yeah. I'm looking at Hendricks to win this fight, to come back from destruction by Wonderboy Thompson.
Yeah, I'm looking at Hendricks to win this fight too, but he better not overlook Gastelum. Gastelum is a tough dude. He's a great wrestler, got good hands. I wouldn't look past him. I hope he doesn't underestimate Gastelum, or it could be a good night for Hendricks.
I'll tell you what, I don't think Hendricks is going to underestimate anybody now with what happened to him by Wonderboy. I mean, I'm not going to get in too much about their fight, but just to say that.
Yeah, but that fight was incredible.
Hendricks, what's that?
That was an incredible performance by Wonderboy.
But Hendricks, he was saying that as I wasn't expecting anything like that. Well, now that he's experienced something like that, I'm sure he's not taking anything for granted. He's going to be ready for somebody to bring a samurai sword in, he's going to be training hard for this fight is what I'm saying. Another good fight on the card. We've got a couple left, but Jim Miller fighting Takanori Gomi. Gomi not looking as good as he did from Pride now that he's in the UFC, but he's winning some, losing some. I believe he's won more than lost. And Miller, he just got that loss to Diego Sanchez, but Miller's still one of the more round-rounded guys. This is gonna be a good fight, Jay. A lot of these fights, there's something about the fights, whether it's the name or the matchup or the title or revenge, whatever. This is just a good, solid fight between two MMA vets, and I'm going Miller.
Yeah, unfortunately for Takanori Gomi, Mike, he's actually lost more than he's won in the UFC. It's almost he lost maybe one more than he's won.
Okay, so that's pretty close.
It's not bad, but he's 35-11. Got a lot of mileage, and he's got beaten up by quite a few people in the UFC. So I preliminary pick, I would pick against him too.
Yeah.
It's just not looking good for Gomi.
Well, last but not least, UFC 200. This is the newest one that was just released today. The previous ones were released on UFC Tonight.
Let me guess. Rosholt.
No. Jake Rosholt actually has been cut, Jay.
Oh, wow.
Despite his 6-2 record. That's
Darn.
how bad the heavyweight division is. But someone else who just looks nothing like Jared Rosholt is Sage Northcutt. Sage Northcutt is back after his loss, and now he's going to try and get his third win in the UFC against a newcomer in Enrique Marin. Marin, I believe, lost his first fight in the promotion. He's a young guy too, so Sage Northcutt's going to try and pick up where he left off and pick up a win though this time and go from there.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of those showcase fights for Sage Northcutt.
Assuming he's not sick this time, and I know that. Look, I've been watching this sport since Matt Hughes and other people have said, look, you don't come to the cage 100%. If you come to the cage 100%, you're not training well enough. And I understand that, but this guy seemed to have something really bad with him. Bad strep throat, just was not himself.
Yeah.
So we'll certainly see this time around if how he looks. If he doesn't look that great, then maybe the strep throat and all that business wouldn't have mattered. But if he kills Enrique Marin as he's beaten his previous 2 wins in the UFC, then Northcutt is still going sky high on the prospect track.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a very motivated Sage Northcutt in this fight. After what happened last time, even without the sickness, I think that has really hurt him. I think that affected him, losing like that. Regardless of being sick. So I think he's going to be well motivated coming, and he should destroy Marin. We'll find out.
Yeah,
so.
I'm going with Northcutt as well. I know we're running out of time. We've got our Fire of the Month, guys.
Yes.
For March.
Fighter of the Month.
Jay, you want to go first this time? Or
I'll go first. It was a very hard decision between 2 people. Okay.
I think the same 2 people is what I'm thinking as well.
I don't know. It might not be, but I'm not even going to say who the other person was in case it might be your person. But the person that I did pick was Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is my Fighter of the Month for March for basically destroying the mythos of Conor McGregor and this whole, mysteriousness about Conor. Can he come up and beat, a guy at 170 pounds, which most people had him winning, before that fight happened. They thought he was going to win this fight and just destroy Nate Diaz. And Nate Diaz beat him and finished him. So Nate Diaz is my Fighter of the Month. What about you, Mike?
Well, I rolled through the events, for this month, looked at the fighters and how they won and all that stuff to jog my memory. And I said, Neil Magny, he looks good. Beat, Lombard. Great fight, came back. Mark Hunt, 1 punch, knockout, walk-off. Justin Gaethje, just, again, demolishing his opponent, needs to move on to the UFC. And I came down to Miesha Tate and Nate Diaz, and I thought Miesha Tate, love Miesha Tate. But I went Nate Diaz as well for everything you said. The reason I didn't do Miesha Tate is because I thought she had a chance to win that fight.
Yeah, we both did. Yeah, we both thought
and so I went with Diaz because I didn't think he was going to win that fight.
Yep.
You said exactly pretty much everything I would have said if I was to go first. Because, I don't know anybody who was picking Diaz. I certainly wasn't. I don't believe you were. And wow, it really was a mix of, actually I'll say this, it was a mix of everything. He didn't get the one punch knockout, but he was in trouble, kind of like, Neil Magny was, and he put it on him like Justin Gaethje did near the end of the fight, and he tapped him out like Miesha Tate tapped out Holly Holm. Yeah. So there you go. I mean, it was all just a great fight.
Yeah, and it's all coming together for Nate Diaz lately. He had some great fights back in the day, and he'd falter here and there and come back and have a great fight. But it seems like his last few fights have been really good, really solid performances. I think Nate Diaz is, honestly, I think he's better than his brother. That's just my opinion. I think he's better than his brother.
Yeah, I think he probably always has been. I don't know, like at specific parts of their career, but in general, I agree. But with Nate Diaz, though, actually with both of them, Nate Diaz's last fights have been against guys who aren't wrestling him, and that's, I hate to keep
that's his downfall. Yeah,
but
yeah, I totally agree with that. But with that said, Mike, we are at the end of the show now, so let's go ahead and wrap things up. If you would like to say anything, go ahead and say it, and we'll wrap the show up.
Yeah, just check out the Facebook page, MMA Think Tank Podcast. I'm writing there every day. Some things that sometimes that won't make the podcast, it'll be on Facebook. So take a look there. So I'm writing every day, writing things there. Jay obviously chimes in as well in the comment section, gives his take and stuff as well. And then we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on just about everything.
YouTube. Yeah, you can look us up. If you Google MMA Think Tank Podcast, our YouTube pops up, Facebook, everything pops up. But at Twitter, it is MMA Think Tank PC, stands for podcast. So, go ahead and tweet at us, follow us. We're out there in the interwebs.
And the next fight's coming up. It looks like it's going to be on the 10th, which is a Sunday, and that is your Ben Rothwell fight with Junior Dos Santos. And then after that, you've got the Fox card, I believe on the 19th, but I could be wrong. That's going to be the big fight with the number one contender between Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov, as well as some others. So we'll have some stuff to talk about next time we come on in a couple of weeks. We'll cover those fights, and well as all the other news that pops up.
Oh, this just in, Dada 5000 has just been added to the UFC 200 card. I'm not laughing. It's there.
Is he working?
He's going to be selling popcorn in the stands. So if you guys get there early. Popcorn goes quick.
That's awesome, man.
But
That's awesome.
Mike, you ruined it for the fans. We could have left that on there for April Fool's joke. It is April Fool's.
You know what? I wasn't even thinking, man. I'm sorry about that. And, let me just clear up. Make sure here. Now that I have it in front of me, UFC Fight at 86 on the 10th. That's Rothwell Dos Anjos, and then on the 16th is UFC on Fox 19. That's Nurmagomedov versus Ferguson. Great card for that Fox card. The other card, not as good, but, with Nurmagomedov versus Ferguson, you also have Rashad Evans, Glover Teixeira, Dan Henderson versus Leo Machida 2, Rose Namajunas versus Tisha Torres, which should be a great fight and maybe a number one contender.
All right, guys. Until next time, catch you later.
Have a good one, guys.
We go. Hey. Rocky, can you tell us about